listening to is EMF, electromagnetic frequency. It's the sound of this monitor screen that I'm monitoring through my monitors. This is the pulse of the video signal. And the piece is called Sandpaper Hammock. I'd invite whoever is comfortable to sit in the chair at any point as a guest, but also as a performer experiencing my voice. I'm going to be talking in rhymes. to static, and you give me a sandpaper hammock. I don't know if this helps or hinders. Questions, comments, concerns, fears?
My first question.
Yes.
I know that you very clearly said the title is, but because of the distortions, I actually wasn't able to hear it. And so I feel that perhaps that's part of the work. But I was curious, as an insider for the conversation, if you let us know what you said is the title.
Sandpaper Hammock,
Okay.
but I think like this part of the bigger piece is called Passing Static Person Screen, but like I didn't really want to say the title. Like I wanted the idea to be the language isn't here yet.
Right.
Yes.
So then my observation that I wasn't really supposed to hear what you were saying totally.
Not yet.
Okay, because I mean, I'm somebody who has 70 decibel tinnitus most of the time, so I often have that kind of experience with hearing, but it felt very intentional. You're distorting what you were saying, but then through repetition, I was able to start to pick up fragments as the different statics kind of waved in and out. So I was able to kind of piece together some of the phrasing, but it felt like so much of what you were saying was there for me not to get.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not just me living with tinnitus
No, it
I
was
was wearing my
fun.
earplugs and I was still getting. I was sitting there for a little bit, but I had to move because the speakers were like drilling into me a little bit. But yeah, I think it's really cool. You're using sound almost like a weapon.
Sound can be violent. The idea of using static is that I'm thinking about the friction between the surface and depth of the technology that we are interacting with. And when I started, I was working with cassettes. People were telling me, edit out the static or switch mediums and use vinyl because no one wants to hear the static. And I was like, this is my medium. Because in a lot of how we're encountering voice, we don't want to hear the static that is about the medium. It's making sound. So part of me is like, I want to lean into that friction. And I think that the screen becomes an obstruction, the static is an obstruction, but also the vehicle through which I'm trying to communicate that.
Am I also correct that the sounds that we were essentially amplifying things that are already, we are experiencing them, not necessarily hearing? Am I correct on that?
Yes.
So it becomes a little bit, people experience that misphonia, or often would describe like utter physical disgust at the sound of hearing someone else chew. That's one of those examples. And so here, by bringing up these sounds that I'm around, I kind of was actually making people quite sick. And for putting it in, for me in the body, the element that made that less of a general thing and made me more directed was when I sat in the chair and I saw myself on the TV and I saw that contact mic in the center of my face.
Yes.
And that arrangement spatially, I think, is important for bringing me, or from my experience, bring me to the space that we're wanting to do this particular. So that kind of single point, even though only one of us is there in it for the run, I think even having had that experience, it lets me know that this is directed specifically at a viewer, not like a kind of more general ambient kind of thing. So I guess I'm interested to ask you then a bit about the space of this work, right? Because you're also there as a performer. And so, is this a performance for one?
Not at all.
Okay.
The idea is you watch yourself watching me, and that the conductor is also a performer. But I was interested in also people telling me what they wanted to see me do in my set when I said it was about sound. So the idea is that we're both performers. And like, I think I also added the screen. It was meant to be both a window and an obstruction. But it's like a lot of times in these spaces, in liberal arts academia, you know, it's also kind of interesting interrogating like who we are sitting watching. And I think a lot about myself behind the screen as like, you know, a racialized person, and I think not all bodies have the same relationship to being seen through a screen. And so I wanted to, like, there was a version of this where I turn it in the performance, but I was like, what would happen if, like, instead of I'm the one being watched, you're watching yourself? I think it affects how we also behave when we know we're being recorded.
Yeah. And also, I don't want to interrupt you, but you also can at least see our interrogator. Is there something about this, like I'm not a horror film person, but it does feel like a kind of torture porn setup, right? Like
it's supposed to be uncomfortable,
right? It feels like Saw or something like that, right? Where there's a sense of being observed, but the mystery of who that is kind of often part of that dramatic arc is that we're not present, whereas you're very present. You're kind of coming into our space.
Yeah.
So that kind of that wall is broken down.
I'm a lot more comfortable in my audience when I'm putting on the spot. And I did that on purpose because I was like, I like subversion in my work. Like the glitch is an opportunity, the static is an opportunity for that. I don't know, how did you guys feel?
Yeah.
Were you uncomfortable? Were you at home?
Girl, you already know I was uncomfortable.
Can you elaborate on the poem that you were working with? Like, did you write it or?
Yeah,
etc.?
I wrote it. I can say the lyrics if that's helpful to understand. But it's like static gave me a sandpaper hammock. Please tell me what you see as I turn my back on you so I can watch you through a screen. Who will remember me longer? And will you remember me by my skin as human being or as static on surface, passive passing person? My habit turns your children into static. Sorry. I cry when I say that part. I don't know why, but that's part. Anyway, that's the poem.
I'm curious, the choice of hardware for the TV screen, like you could have picked something more modern and it would have had almost like a mirror-like reflective quality. Why like an older piece of hardware?
Because I like the sound of it. It has a different sound. I think also the impact of kind of interrogating technology, I wanted it to stand out a little bit. Like I felt if I used like a monitor screen that looked more modern, the idea is also looking at things that were naturalized, so like a cell phone. So I felt like this boxy and this obvious big chunk of tech would be easier as an obstruction as well. Because our screens get thinner and less obvious as obstructions and windows, right? So I was interested in doing that, make it obvious, if that makes sense. And people kept saying, I want to see video, so I was like, okay, watch yourself watching me.
It was really uncomfortable and very intimate too. Especially knowing you outside of OCAD and your work, you're such like a bubbly person, and I've never seen your actual work before. We've never had a class together or anything until now. I was very curious, and it was almost like a flip switch when you started. It really caught me off guard. You were a little scary during it, and I liked it. I think it was really effective and made me really uncomfortable. Like, I know it was like meant to do that. And sitting here, like when it was happening, because even when I first came in, I didn't realize the setup, and I just sat down, and then I immediately felt like I shouldn't be sitting here, and like I was like, okay, I shouldn't move, and I got up and moved, so like, oh, this is like something else. And then when I sat back down, because I was so like enamored by your performance, but then every once in a while I would remember that like I'm on the screen, and I would look back, and I was like, I didn't know what to do, so I would just like smile at the camera because I wasn't sure what to do. But then you would like catch my attention again, and then I would like look at you, and then I'd find myself be like, like looking at you performing, and then because you're like hyper aware when you're sitting in front of the camera and literally pointing at you, it makes you feel very like squirrely a little, like not sure what to do with your hands and stuff.
I appreciate that reflection. I was trying to be scary, so I'm wearing a blazer.
It was terrible.
The original advice I was given was like have the camera facing me, and I was like, it's really uncomfortable like being in front of the camera. And I also had the thought that if I started with the camera facing the chair, I was like, who's gonna sit in the chair? Who wants to be visible on the screen? But we are, you know. There's a bunch of cameras pointed at us all the time, and so it's like, I don't know. I wanted to make that salient. Yeah. Thank you for the reflection.
I think that, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
That's really on point because everything you've done is unexpected, I think, because I came in a little later. I had no idea what was on the screen. I was assuming that was a recording of you. 'Cause, like, I don't know, immediately I expected that. And once I realized that it was recorded here, then, like you said, it makes you look at the person beside you on the chair physically right now, like this, how they look right now, and then on the screen. And I love how you, like the color of the light, like the temperature, the brightness of the light too. I think it interacts with the screen too, which makes it, more abstract, or leaves it to imagination a little bit. And I also want to comment on the shadow. I think the way you place the light, I don't know if it was intentional, but again, it says something about the perception and how you look at things. As I was watching your shadow alone, it made me think that you were actually turned back that way, facing that way, and you're working that way. And then I questioned, why am I thinking this way? Like, am I seeing you as you're turned back? You're back against me. What does that mean? So it makes me definitely like have these questions, and it becomes, when there's a discussion, when there's a question, it becomes controversial, I think, and it's really successful in that.
Thank you. I appreciate you noticing that. That was definitely an intention. When I was rehearsing, I was like, why don't you watch my shadow instead of the projection? Because I see projection as the externalization of the shadow, right? So I thought it would be interesting, and again, I was more comfortable that way. And the blue light as well, I appreciate you noticing that as well. Like, I tried to match it in a way so that it's like, we're also on the screen. I'm recording this critique with that phone over there. Let me know where you are if no one wants to hear that.
I hope I don't block it.
No, you're good, no worries. But yeah, like that's also part of it, like, yeah.
I have a question that comes back to the observation about why that CRT monitor. And it does put the work into a certain time and place. But I also, there's something about the scale and the depth of that object that sculpturally, and where I come from, is quite interesting. Because when I arrived, you were sitting in the chair, and the monitor was right, I think, between your eyes, the contact. But when I sat, because I'm a little taller, it dropped into my neck. And it made me notice that, think a little bit about the scale of that screen in relation to the bodies being depicted, and that it also has the capacity, depending on where you focus that camera, to set me in a one-to-one scale. And I'm wondering if there's, in the future, kind of ways to refine that. Like, I wonder, made me think, would I felt differently if my head was the whole size of the monitor, as if the monitor became the helmet. And it felt like there's an opportunity there that perhaps I'm asking as a question. That where our representations could become, does the scale of our representations matter to you?
On a technical level, in multiple ways, yes, in terms of visually, but sonically it would sound different if I zoomed in and there was less light on the screen. So if I actually turned the light to you, it would change the frequency and the sound, which I've done. Like I tried that. I can demonstrate. I can turn it into it. But this also has, I forgot to mention, like technically a video signal out. So I can actually easily plug the video signal into this. But yes, the video changing will alter the sound. And that's both in the electromagnetic frequency, but also in the video signal. Yes, and we did something, Saad works with like feedback and stuff. Like we did an experiment before where like the camera and working with feedback also creates like its own sense of distortion. Sort of something itself.
Can I ask a dumb technical question? So that that in the work then, the inputs are coming from sound frequencies from these other objects. So the light is contributing, the video monitor is contributing, but then that modulation gets filtered into sound. does it actually ever filter back into modifying the light and modifying the video representation?
So I'm actually sourcing most of the sound from the screen.
Okay.
If I face a light to the person put on the screen, it becomes brighter.
Okay.
So it's essentially not really filtered. Like the signal, for part of it, yes. But the direct signal is like, I can get a pure sound from
Okay.
that. And I can get just off the surface with this guy. But mainly it's coming from this and radio static. I also designed like a kind of probe. So like this is like a choke mic, which you can also use to like get electromagnetic frequencies. Like this is also an instrument. This part of the technique is like I worked with different electronics for what I liked in terms of sound. The visual was secondary.
But in terms of the in exploring the static,
Yes.
it's the static is the direct line from this object, but then the static is not, it's not being used to alter something else after the fact.
No, nothing besides the sound. But if I take a video signal pulse from this screen and input it into my mixer, it actually I used it to affect the radio static because it like disrupts the circuit. I don't know if that makes sense. Anyway, I'm still learning as I go.
Well, no, it's interesting to hear like what the directions are within the performance, because thinking about this blue light, keep thinking of the way that when you're walking down the street at night and someone's watching TV and you see that blue light pulsing in the room based on whatever on the screen you can't see. And I was curious if that became part of the trajectory of.
It could. In one variation, I was able to get it to be audio reactive and flickering.
Okay. Yeah.
But I found it was like maybe too distracting to try. And I'm interested in hearing like one by one how this reached people. But like I would consider that for sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.